All right, well, thank you for joining. I'm going to get started. Just a little information about me. Um, Started out in real estate out of college. Um, Joined Patterson Dental after a couple years. I was working in New Jersey doing the daily supplies and inventory for Patterson Dental. Transferred down to the Richmond market within Patterson, living out of Charlottesville, and managed their equipment. Really dove into the AutoCAD design. I was designing my own offices at that time, and really enjoyed the job, but kind of hit a ceiling with Patterson. Joined Southeast Transitions, which is now US Transitions, several years ago. Worked with them for 2 or 3 years. Learned under a good friend of mine and mentor, Pete Newcomb, who runs that company. Then I hung my own shingle. I always tell the students, I said, it was hard for me to go do seminars for students and say, hey, you should start your own business when, shoot, I wasn't. I was working for somebody else. So I've enjoyed every minute of it. I love what I do. We're constantly expanding not only our knowledge, but hopefully our reach and our ability to educate the market and so on and so forth. So I'm going to dive in here. Let me drop that down. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about EBITDA. I'm going to start right there. It's the most important thing. It's kind of like the pulse of your practice. Okay, so EBITDA is a financial measuring tool. It's basically earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization. In essence, it's your net profit, okay, after you've paid yourself, and then adding back your tax, depreciation, amortization, and interest, okay? We don't have to get too crazy into that calculation, but what I want to do is just make sure that you're aware that this is an important calculation to keep a pulse of. You'll be hearing this throughout. You're going to hear EBITDA as a way of basically saying, okay, this business, this company, these locations are healthy or not. Yeah, again, it's the pulse. So that's why I wanted to start there. Typically, you should have about 12% minimum of EBITDA in total locations, right? So if you're running a multi-location situation right now, we would go in and analyze all your financials, break it down, and look at a per office number of EBITDA, and I'd also look at the total number. That'll tell me where I need to improve, well, in essence, it's a great tool for telling you where you need to improve. But in essence, it also tell me, is this a healthy organization? And if it's not, and if it's 12% or less, there's many reasons why. And I'm going to be getting into that. I could tell you off the top of my head by just glancing at financials, all the situations and problems that are actually occurring that you running the business, letting just coasting by, maybe probably more or less don't even understand or know. So again, if you're not managing your EBITDA and you're trying to run a multi-practice corporation, you're not doing yourself any justice. And I will give you an example. So let's just say that we have 2 separate DSOs, okay? When I see DSOs, I mean, if you want to get into it, technically, if you're a dentist, that's technically a DDSO, a dentist-owned dental service organization. But either way, if you're going to go this direction and you want to build multiple locations and a corporation the right way, you have to look at the entity, A, as a separate entity, and you have to how do you say it? Refer to this entity as its own entity, okay? As your DSO, okay? Which is a dental service organization, which is what you would be creating. So we have two situations here, okay? On the left, you have the dental service organization A, okay? They've got $7 million in gross collections, 5 locations, a $1.5 million EBITDA, which represents 21% of the gross collections. On the right, we have DSO B. okay? Also, $7 million in gross collections, 5 locations, 700,000 in EBITDA, which represents 10% of the annual gross collections. So DSOA has the legal structure set up correctly. They have their associates and management team potentially tied to restricted stock units, which I'll get into. They have centralized services in place, which I'll get into. They have low turnover, consistent growth and production. And DSOB, okay, not so much. There's no real legal structure that tied the entities together correctly. Each office is kind of run separately. Flat production over the last 2 years, but $7 million is still making some money, right? The actual enterprise value, which at the end of the day, the reason you folks are more than likely going down this road of acquiring locations, practices, and growing your entity is eventually you're going to sell it, right? I mean, that is 101 business. If you're going to build a business, you build it to sell it, okay? So we talked about DSOA. Look at the actual value here. Let me see if I can use one of these little fun tools. Shit. Sorry, bear with me. Let me go back. That's what you get for trying to play with their little tools up here. Anyway, $12 million in enterprise value for that practice that has the ideal legal structure, okay? That has tied their top associates and management team through stock options. It's not stock options, it's actually restricted stock units. Centralized services are in place and the low turnover, and it's consistent, right? Now, DSOB, which honestly is what most of the DSOs that I analyze and work with when I get started, they look like DSOB, okay? And that is, when I sit down and I look at their EBITDA, it's roughly 10%, give or take. And their values really, look at the difference. We're talking about $9 million a difference between two practices. And all it is starting right from the base, building correctly, tying yourself to the right locations. And I'm going to go through all that, okay? But I just wanted to show you these numbers to show how important it is to not be helter-skelter. I love when I hear that. Yeah, we've got $7 million in gross. To me, I shake my head. I'm like, that's wonderful. Let me see what your profits are. Let me see what you're actually doing here. And the majority of the time, there's such helter-skelter. There's a lot of help that's needed to get to the point where they really want to hit a magic number. And I'll get into that for a minute. Common mistakes and pitfalls. Again, locations are random. They're not thought out. It's kind of like, oh, my friend told me about a practice here. I think I want to start there. And we're going to get into vision and why that's important into creating the ideal spread of location. Again, each location runs separately. More common than not, and you cannot scale a business that way, bottom line. Policies and procedures, some basic stuff in the offices, okay? If you don't have policies and procedures across the board, each office is going to act differently. Each office is going to be run differently. There's going to be different numbers, different management. You're going to have to manage them each differently, which is a waste of time if you're going to expand to multiple practices, okay? And again, you do those things, you're not truly a scalable business. So it all starts with a base, right? What is that base? The base is, you have to define your vision. When I do my advising on multi-practices, we literally spend a full day, 8 hours with a whiteboard, and we go through to truly define what the vision of the business is. It's the most important basis. I know in my business, we did it. And it really helped us center what is Commonwealth Transitions. And not only does it help us center that, we know where we're growing, we know where we're going, because we know who we are, okay? And we know what our value systems are, right? So here's just a few questions that we use when we go through our seminar. What thrills you about dentistry? What are your pain points? Things that we can work on, right? Things that we can grow on. What's your goal for 5-year expansion? Goal setting is probably one of the most important things for successful people. Bottom line, if you're not goal setting, most of you are very, very successful, right? You've gotten to this point in your life, wherever you are. And most of you own businesses, right? And you've gone through dental school, congratulations, right? But you had goals, whether you wrote them down or not. Okay, so now when you're starting this multi-unit corporation DSO, you've got a plan. You've got to have a business plan, right? Again, it starts with the vision, then we start to plan, okay? So what is your reasonable 5-year goal for expansion? Now, how many offices do you have? What does the management team look like? You kind of got to visualize that kind of stuff. And again, this is stuff we spend, we spend a full day on. So I honestly could dive into every subject and spend hours, but my goal here is to give everybody some pearls of wisdom, some ideas, and hopefully expand your concept of what it really takes to be successful, and hopefully some guidance as well. Your magic number, okay? So, and everybody should have a magic number, right? What is the end game for all this work that you're going to put in? Is it $10 million, right? Or $12 million eventual sellout, and you're sitting on the beach and you started another venture, or and what is your timeline on that? Again, all about goal creation, understanding where you're going. Without that, you're like a rudderless ship, quite frankly. All right, we talked about so creating a platform for your business is where it starts, right? Now, it's the next step, right? So you've talked about, you've created your vision, you have your goals all set up. Now we got to talk about, okay, here's what we have. Some people on here might have 1 location. Others might have 4 locations, 5 locations, whatever you have. If I'm talking to you individually, it's going to be different for everybody. But understanding what centralization of services is the difference between your typical DSO and your helter-skelter, rudderless, multi-practice business or corporation. So some examples like a call center, your payroll, your accounting services, your insurance services. These things should, you don't duplicate those things in every office. And if you are, there's a reason why your EBITDA is 10% or less. Okay, that's one of the main factors. Okay, so if you have 5 locations, I'm going to go through an example where a 3-location practice, and I'll be able to lay it out for you exactly what I'm talking about. But you shouldn't have to duplicate these services. Okay, now if you have 1 practice and you're looking for the second, you don't have to be there right now. But you got to know where you want to go. Okay, and you got to have the people in the back of your mind. If you don't have them, you got to start acquiring the management team that's going to start doing this type of stuff for you. Okay. Now, creating a platform for your business, it's kind of it's a big word for basically saying without a platform, you're not scalable. Okay. And if you're not scalable, ultimately what that means, and I touch on the next slide, but that means that you're adding locations, but your top line's only growing from the acquisition, meaning your other locations are probably struggling. Okay, they're either flat or down because you don't have the proper scalable structure and platform. So ideas like marketing, cash realization, which is in essence, a way to understand how to budget your debt versus your income. Okay, because most people are acquiring debt as they're acquiring practices. Okay, and that is a great factor to understand how fast you can grow. Okay, but anyway, you should have a business team that is analyzing your marketing, budgeting, and your finances. You also should have a clinical team that's monitoring things like staffing, your equipment supplies, and compliance oversight, right, of your procedures and policies that you've put together, your bonus structures, whatever you've done. Right? These are things that you've got to have that management team, the people that surround you that you can count on, because you as the owner, and I'm talking as if you have 1 solo owner here. You as an owner cannot do all this yourself. You cannot. Okay, and if you do, you will burn out. So we talked about management team, how important it is to focus on your management team and make sure you have a solid management team, in essence. And again, I talked about scalable infrastructure. This is very important. Scalable means that you can grow without losing revenue from your other locations. Okay, you've got all the platforms we've talked about and laid out. Now, you've got to understand how important it is to set up a management and operating agreement so you're structured properly for growth. okay? So when you're creating a legal structure, you got to know your strategy. We already talked about that, right? We started with our vision. Okay. Now we start talking about goal setting. Okay. We're in the planning stage. Okay. Now we can say, okay, with as much certainty as we can possibly imagine, here's where our company is going to be in 5 years. Okay. Now let's build a legal structure around that. Okay. There are many different models out there. I cannot sit here and go into each model. I'm just going to give you an example generally of one. But you want to model out your future cash flow and value. We talked about that. Once you do that, again, you can build the correct contract and operating agreements around, and management agreements around that. You want to set the proper expectations, not only today, but 5 years from now, if you're offering equity to owners and staff and associates, okay? And again, I'm a fan of offering equity. I think that, and we'll get into it, what is the real cost of turnaround? And if you're running a 5-10 location business, and you're running it like DSOB, like I discussed before, all you're doing is filling in holes from the leaking ships, okay? And you're running to one ship to fill that hole so it doesn't sink, and then run to the next one. That is, you can't run a business that way. And you can, but you're going to basically overpay salary-wise in order to have that happen. So you might have all the equity, but you've given away all your EBITDA just to keep everybody happy. Again, that is more common than it is not. And there's other ways to do it. In order to do it right, we have a team of different attorneys that specialize just in setting up management service agreement, operating agreements for the proper structure based around everything we've talked about. And I'm sure there are other attorneys out there that do it. So retaining your top people, whether it's associates or management team. 3 ways that you can do it, okay? Earnouts, restricted stock units, and phantom equity, okay? I'm a fan of RSUs. I think it's the, again, if you're running an organization, right, you're building a corporation or you're running this organization that's already got the 5 to 7, 10 locations or 15, whatever it may be. You really have to run it like a business, okay? And what do great businesses do? After Enron had that the scandal with the stock options that expired, and a lot of people were fooled into working for just stock that ended up materializing to nothing. Most large blue chip companies, in order to retain their top people, offered what's called restricted stock units. And the major difference is that restricted stock units, as soon as they're vested, they're like any other share of a company's stock, and they never lose value, okay? And the value is obviously based on the underlying shares. Again, unless the whole organization falls apart, which I don't think is ever done. Worst case scenario, you sell off piece by piece, and there's still value. Now, again, the key to RSUs, and I apologize, a little bit of blurriness. This was an example mock-up that we did for one of our clients, basically, which allows us to say, okay, your organization enterprise value currently is worth X. You have 2 associates that you want to offer some equity. We want to make sure with this RSUs that they never acquire more than 50% equity in the corporation, right? You want to maintain control. Never want to give that up. So there is calculations. It gets quite in depth. And again, just giving you an example of how in depth it can get. This is just one sheet that allows us to break down based on production, okay, and vesting period, how you should offer the RSUs to your associates to keep them happy and in place. Now, the other thing is a phantom stock. I mean, this is kind of fun. I mean, it's one of these things like you can, again, you establish what your stock value is per share, and you can offer the value of a certain amount of shares to an associate or an employee without actually offering those shares. So what that in essence is just assume that you offer 10 shares a year for improving production in a certain location for the associate, and that 10% is worth, or I'm sorry, the 10 shares are worth $50 each. You know, so there you go. You got your $5,000 bonus. There you go. Is somebody else doing that? Pretty cool though. Anyway, so anyway, the whole point is you're not actually offering stock, you're offering the value of the stock, which is, again, another way to offer some incentive. And what the hell is that? Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what that is. Anyway, hold on. Aha, the eraser. All right, earnout. Earnout is just a provision that, you know, if you have a certain location and you have an associate and they achieve a certain amount of goals that you set, again, going back to the contracts, right? We already have this in place. This is not something we create every couple of years. We thought through this stuff when we created the management agreements. And so you can offer, you know, a bonus if, you know, if they run that location solely, that associate, and they're producing X and they're increasing growth in that location each year, you can offer a share of your sale of that kind of location. Let's just say you sold the 10 locations, or go back to the original example, the 5 locations, and that one location increased at 10%. You can set a value that will pay out that associate at the end. Now, earnout's okay, but it only pays out when you actually sell, and associate may not want to wait that long, right? So again, we can get into this kind of stuff individually for everyone that, if anyone wants to go any further. Must have an understanding. You got to understand your real estate growth plan. So we're talking a little bit now about how do you finance all this, right? You can obviously finance with cash if you're that fortunate, but if not, like the rest of us, you know, you have to leverage. You have to take on some debt to grow. So again, we've already developed our realistic growth plan. We look at our current debt, our leverage ratios, and debt service coverage ratios. These things allow us to, the banks are going to want to see how quickly, what our cash flow looks like, what our debt looks like, and we got to understand these ratios when we present our plan to them. So the types of financing. So if we start talking about the ideal type of financing, it's all dependent on what you, again, who are you and what's your plan? If you are buying one practice, and most people on here either probably already have that, but most people on here are here because they want to grow their business, right, to multiple locations. But if you're going to go one practice, regional banks, First Citizens, you know, Fulton Bank, there's a bunch of them out there. They're great, perfect, wonderful, but they are capped at 1, maybe 2. You don't want to play with them beyond 1 location. Now, if you're getting in, most people on this call are going to be in that conventional lending zone. So basically, it's great for like 3 to 5 locations, up to about 2 to 3 million in debt, and the rates are very, very positive. I mean, right now you're getting 3.5% from, you know, banks like TD and Bank of America, give or take. Now, you want to start playing with the big boys, you get into the lower middle and the middle market lenders. We're talking about private equity, we're talking about venture capitalists, things like that. This is, once you start getting over 3 million in debt, here's the thing though, you know, you start getting into that level, you're also paying about 7-8% minimum interest on these loans. Okay, now at that point, you're able to do middle market because your EBIT is already, you know, $3 million. You're not worried about paying a couple extra percent because you've already been capped off by the conventional lending. Now again, we're talking about starting at 0 or 1 practice and building to this larger organization. If you're going to do it right, you start with the conventional lending, right? You don't start at the regional bank. You start with conventional lending, okay? And that'll take you as far as you need to go up until, if you want to keep going further, then you can roll that into a lower middle market lender, okay? But there's no reason to dive into a middle market lender or lower middle market lender out of the gate, because you're going to be paying a major premium on interest. And nobody's going to be able to grow that fast. There's too much competition. So again, the other thing is, and I say this, I say, build a relationship with your bank, okay, or your lender. You know, back in the day, right? You know, I talked to some of the sellers, and they'll say, "Yeah, I just went into my bank, and John," and I shook his hand. I said, I need a loan," and they said, and they said, "Thank you," and they said, you know, "Oh, sure, you know, take your loan, you're good to go," right? So, anyway, build a relationship with your lenders. It's really important. Location of practices. Again, this is something really important to kind of understand and consider. So practices should be regionalized, not located close or too far. You gotta, we talked about your vision, right? You gotta define who you are, where you wanna be, and stuff like that. And part of it is, you know, maybe you're the city guy, right? You want every, you know, you wanna be distanced far enough from each location so that you're not pulling in from each, the pool of each location, right? Far enough so that you have a whole new market and a whole new pond of fishing, but close enough where if you need to be there, you can get there. I typically say 45 minutes is perfect, but I'm talking about more in a rural setting. If you want to get into city, obviously it's probably 45 minutes with traffic, but maybe even close to a half hour away is ideal. Do I want to be in a medical park? Do I want to be the guy that's always in the medical park? Do I want to be in a retail center? Is that who I am? Do I want to be the owner of the real estate, or I just want to lease everything? Things that we have to plan. And once you have that plan, that's what you target. You don't stray, okay? So I'm going to do a quick little presentation here on a practice that I have, just to kind of walk you through some of the things that you should look at when purchasing a practice. What are the factors? What am I looking for? Okay. And again, hopefully these are some pearls of wisdom that you guys can kind of take and look at. So I'm just going to look at, in this practice here, I'm going to really focus on 2019. 2020 was a mess all across the board. 2020 was a mess all across the board for a lot of doctors. I mean, this group rebounded decently, but you know, they're down 2 months of production and it shows. So I'm just going to look at 19 as a real typical number. Now, this is a 3-doctor practice where 1 doctor actually retired currently, okay? And so up here, I'm looking at 2 things. I'm looking at, okay, their hygiene is 40%. That's strong. That's telling me, you know, hey, there is definitely room for operative growth here, right? So typically you want to be, if you're between 25 and 30%, you're healthy. If you're over that, I tend to say that your operative department or your clinical department is unhealthy. Something needs to change. They need to grow. You need to expand what you're doing, or get better associates, quite frankly, if you have associates. So it's a very important number to understand. But if I'm buying a practice, I love this. This tells me great potential for growth. Doctors in this case, in my opinion, are underperforming. Most of you on here could probably produce around 366 a year, I would assume. Okay. But overall, they're doing fine, right? They're doing a 1.6. This is 1 location. They got 12 treatment rooms. Again, now I'm going to get in the nitty gritty here, and I'm going to start looking at their expenses. Okay, they're a little heavy here on salary. Why? Because this top line is not big enough. That's why. Because it should be doing $2 million overnight. Again, in this case, moving forward, the 3rd doctor had left after 2019. They're down to 2, but they're really kicking butt and as best they can, because they just don't work. They're not killing it. So an associate should be able to come in here and absolutely kill it. And I'll show you on a pro forma. But again, you see these ratios. This ratio comes well into line as soon as that top line comes down. But then I look at the rest, and they're, again, in this practice is really strong. And I know that because I look at their adjusted EBITDA, and it's 21%, even 23% this year. That is super strong, right? Going back to that model, right? If you're over 20%, you're going to get a higher multiple for your business, okay? It just is what it is. This is exactly what your competitors want, the actual DSOs. This is what they want, okay? And you should too, okay? So anyway, I'm going to quickly go through a pro forma on this just to kind of give you an idea. So if I bought this practice and I expanded into this location, I project that you should be able to do what you did in 2019 with a little bit more, which basically means your associate does 543. Okay. Doctor, by the way, in this case, again, something really important. Think like a DSO. Okay. In this case, the two owners are going to be staying for 2 years plus. Okay. That's ideal. You have that glue. Okay. One guy wants to stay for like 10 years. The other guy wants to stay 2 to 3 and then see where it goes. So you've got your anchors already in place. You can drop an associate in there, okay? Because the structure, the glue is already there, right? And in this case, because all the staff is there built for a 3-doctor practice, again, you drop an associate in this one, and here you go. So basically, your EBITDA at that number is 649 grand. This thing's priced right around 1.3 million. So if you take out the debt, annual debt on the loan, you're left with 519 grand in EBITDA. So if you're an investor, right, and you never work a second in this practice, and it grows very, very slowly, you should still make $500,000 after debt on a business like this with 2 doctors in place, glue, okay? And this is the kind of stuff that you should be looking for. Now, yes, most DSOs would be on this in 2 seconds and offer a majorly high price. But this happens a lot with a lot of my listings. You know, I let my sellers dictate what they want. And a lot of times they say, look, I don't necessarily want to sell the DSO. I would rather sell to that doctor, that solo guy. Okay. So being a dentist who actually owns, you know, a couple locations, you're not seen on that same level. And so in this case, that's what this group is looking for. So again, and I get into it later, and I'll talk a little bit more about how to position yourself and leverage yourself to get in, to get the inside track on deals like this kind of stuff. So again, in essence, at the end of the day, a practice like this, after debt, nets you $500,000. You got 2 people in place, home run. Okay. Now again, I can't speak for anyone on this call, but does it fit? Is it in that rural environment that we thrive in? Is it in a city environment that we thrive in? Is it you know, within an hour, give or take, of one of our other locations? Or is that a region, okay, that I want to expand into, and this is my hub, right? Because that's how you do it. You build a really strong hub and then build around it. For instance, using the state of Virginia, if I have a practice in Richmond, okay, but I want to build something down in the Southwest, I'm going to look for an anchor. When I say an anchor, it doesn't have to be in the city of Roanoke or Lynchburg, but it has to be a really strong practice that's going to be consistent and grow. So if it's somewhere in that area, I can build an anchor there and then start picking off little ones within the 30, 45-minute range of that practice. So I'm going to go back to my little slideshow here. Bear with me. So I made up like a kind of, I don't know, where am I? Hold on, bear with me. There we go. So I made up kind of just like a mock little thing here of a practice. So this one had this practice had 3 locations. As you see, hygiene 22%. Okay, and then you're looking at overhead. I'm looking at, you know, staff's a little high. That's fine. You know, everything seems to be okay, but with hygiene down so low, this is a 3-location practice that only has 10% EBITDA. You know, and I talked about that from the beginning. What is the point of going through all this, okay, if you're not managing to make money and to have a strong exit strategy, an entrepreneurial value that makes sense for everybody involved, right? And so I'm going to kind of close out a little bit on your competition. And, you know, again, you're swimming with the sharks when you're competing with DSOs. So what that means is you know, a practice, let's just say, I'm use Richmond as an example in the state of Virginia. There's a practice in Richmond, okay, that has 10 treatment rooms, is doing $2 million, you know, 600,000 in EBITDA. Uh, you've got to be on your game. You've got to be able to present like the corporations do. And how do you do that? You have your ducks in order, right? You basically have your structure done. You can explain what kind of equity plans you have for employees and for sellers, and you can tell them, hey, call John from this office. I run it like my own. You know, we're unique, right? So your biggest leverage is, I'm a dentist. Okay, I was very successful in my 1-2 locations. Everybody loves us. We're easygoing. We don't shove dentistry down people's throats, but we do run an efficient business, right? That is your competitive edge, okay? But you are more than likely going to miss out on a lot of those. So you might have to expand what you believe is, ideal, okay? And I know I have a good friend of mine that I think he's got 10 locations now. Man, he's picked off some of the garbage, but man, he's able to turn it around because the systems are in place. And each one, they're all in kind of rural environments. He knows exactly how to handle the clientele. And he's done very well turning those things around. So whatever your niche is, you got to be a little flexible just in case if you want to grow, because there's other competition out there, right? Again, I'm not a big salesy guy, but if anybody wants to dive into any of this stuff, we do offer all kinds of services to assist you. And here's my information, and that's it for tonight. I honestly appreciate everybody coming out and listening. If you have any questions, email, cell, phone, call me. Love to help you out. That practice is actually for sale that I did an example of. I figured, why not? Let's show people what they could potentially have. So anybody interested in that, I could do a Zoom meeting with you and kind of walk you through all the financials and really take our time with it. So having said that, thank you again. This will be videotaped, recorded, and sent out for anyone who missed it. And that's it. Thank you very much. Have a great night.